You are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. The US military commander in the Middle East has said that American forces have struck nearly 2,000 targets so far in Iran as part of the largest firepower buildup in the region in a generation. Lebanese militant group Hezbollah has targeted northern Israel's Haifa naval base in response to the Israeli military's ongoing strikes against the Iran-backed movement's strongholds in Lebanon, including the southern suburbs of Beirut. The United States has started facilitating charter flights from a number of countries in the Middle East for the US citizens stranded in the region, as Washington's joint military strikes with Israel on Iran have severely disrupted global air travel. The move came 4 days after the US-Israeli air war on Iran began. Britain is deploying HMS Dragon, an air defence destroyer, to Cyprus after the runway of its Akrotiri base there was hit by an Iranian-made drone. Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he was sending the naval vessel along with helicopters with counter-drone capabilities to the region as the conflict in the Middle East intensifies. President Emmanuel Macron has said that France is sending its aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle to Mediterranean and working to build a coalition that would help secure maritime traffic imperiled by the escalating crisis in the Middle East. Macron said that the action needed to be taken with the Strait of Hormuz closed and the Suez Canal and Red Sea shipping routes threatened by the widening conflict. The dollar rallied to a 3-month high in early trading in Asia, with investors retreating from the euro as the growing conflict in the Middle East sparked fears of sustained rise in the energy prices. The euro traded down, extending losses into its third day after earlier hitting its weakest since last November. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has agreed to testify in the congressional inquiry of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The former New York financier has faced pressure over his associations with the late Epstein, especially after publicly released files undercuts his claims of when he had severed ties with him. The Trump administration is quietly building a legal case against Venezuelan interim president Delcy Rodriguez, including ratifying in a draft criminal indictment. Federal prosecutors have put together possible corruption and money laundering charges and have communicated to Rodriguez that she is at risk of prosecution unless she continues to comply with Trump's demands. And for your top story this hour, the US military has reported striking nearly 2,000 targets in Iran as part of a massive firepower buildup in the region. Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of US Central Command, said that more than 2,000 munitions have been used, severely dredging Iran's air defenses and destroying hundreds of ballistic missiles, launchers and drones. Cooper described the operation, named Operation Epic Fury, as nearly double the scale of the 2003 Iraq shock and awe strikes. He added that the US and Israeli forces continue to carry out 24/7 strikes across multiple domains, including sea, air and cyberspace. The US has also sunk 17 Iranian ships, including an operational submarine. Let's now listen in to what the US Army Admiral had to say.
More than 50,000 troops, 200 fighters, 2 aircraft carriers, and bombers from the United States are participating in this operation, and more capability is on the way. These forces bring a massive amount of firepower, representing the largest buildup by the U.S. in the Middle East in a generation. In the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury, U.S. Central Command forces, together with Israel, delivered overwhelming and unprecedented strikes into Iran. Many of you may remember the shock and awe strikes of 2003. The first 24 hours of this operation were nearly double the scale, and we continue with 24/7 strikes into Iran from seabed to space and cyberspace. Now, we're less than 100 hours into this operation, and we've already struck nearly 2,000 targets with more than 2,000 munitions. We have severely degraded Iran's air defenses and destroyed hundreds of Iran's ballistic missiles, launchers, and drones. And in simple terms, we're focused on shooting all the things that can shoot at us. We are also sinking the Iranian Navy, the entire Navy. Thus far, we've destroyed 17 Iranian ships, including the most operational Iranian submarine that now has a hole in its side. Now, in retaliation, the Iranian regime has launched over 500 ballistic missiles.
Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has stated that the recent US and Israeli actions in the Middle East appear to be inconsistent with international law. Carney clarified that while it is for the US and Israel to justify their actions, he believes the strikes raise legal concerns. He also confirmed that Canada was not informed beforehand and was not asked to participate in the strikes. We're now being joined by Shruti Dasgupta, who's an international affairs analyst, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you, Shruti, for joining us here today on NewsX World. How does Canada's public criticism of the US and Israeli operations, framed around international law, reflect broader divisions among Western allies over the conduct of the war?
Well, Canada is a key NATO ally for America. They have major trade and they have major tensions been brewing for the past few months between Trump and Carney. They've had a back and forth of rhetoric which does not reflect good diplomatic relations as of now. In such times when it has almost become the rest of the world against Iran kind of a scenario in the Middle East, when Carney comes out and says these words, he's stating the exact position of most of the rational world, where they say that the attack was preemptive, it was not probably necessary, there was a chance of diplomacy to survive, and US acted without consulting any of its allies, any of its friends, any of its partners, strategic partners, and put at risk not just the lives of the people in Iran or Israel. He has put people at risk in other Gulf nations by starting a war that it could not properly contain. The second part of his statement that I feel reflects is that the West is very concerned about the high-handed manner in which Donald Trump is now working around. In the case of Venezuela, they were kind of muted because they did not particularly like Maduro. They don't particularly like Ayatollah Khamenei as well, but they do not like how this has turned into a regular way of dealing with Trump's problem, to act first and then demand support from all his partners and alliance partners and basically people that he actually counts on as clout. So it tends to reflect very poorly on the nations he calls his very good partner, or very good coalition partner, or very good strategic partner. And on top of it, if you do not bow to him, he, like for Spain yesterday, or even UK, he starts hinting at trade wars all over again. So there is, of course, no matter what deal is inked, where we all know now that it is, even if the ink is dry on it, it is never quite firm. Because whenever Donald Trump's line is not toed by his strategic partners or defense alliance partners, he will use that particular trade deal and yank the carpet right under from their feet. So they are not comfortable with how he operates without having an understanding with his partners. They want to be held as a partner, not as a vassal state that I do and you follow. Trump is not the mama duck, and the others don't have to follow him around quacking the same line that he is saying. So this is a universal frustration from the West that I see echoing through these statements. None of them support Iran. None of them want Iran to get nuclear weapons. None of them are actually mourning the death of Khamenei. What they're mourning is the complete breakdown of law and order. Even UN Charter supports Iran's right to defense right now under Article 51. This itself, the laws laid down by these very same nations, are being violated by Trump under intelligence that only he has privy to. And his statements, if you've seen for the past 2-3 days, and his Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, all of them kind of wander. Some of them say that Israel wanted to strike first and it would have resulted in deaths to American assets or American soldiers because Iran had warned of the same, so we attacked with Israel first. Then they say Iran was building nuclear, but 8 months ago they were saying all the nuclear facilities are way down. It cannot be, it does not have the capability to do dirty bombs. So the problem is, there is no consistency in the line that they want to project to the people. They are unable to justify their actions. Nobody in the world supports what Khomeini was doing to its women, to its people, to its protesters. But nobody wants to support Trump in his high-handed actions. And Carney's statement is a reflection of the same.
And what do the reported US strikes on nearly 2,000 targets in Iran indicate about the current phase of the conflict, and how sustainable is this level of military action?
I would like to believe that 2,000 number, and I think it would be pretty much close to accurate. But what you need to understand is those 2,000 targets are not arrays, not the ballistic missile arrays. What has happened in the last 24 to 48 hours in Iran is that they've deployed a mosaic defense system. What does that mean? That means they have decentralized their command. They have separated into 31 smaller groups with individual commanders given a standard operating procedure and targets to hit. They have their kill list already. They already know what they're going to do, and they've been given the free will to do it. Now, when that is happening, when they are already aware of what they're supposed to do, IRGC has become something similar to what your Hamas Hezbollah is. 2 years of conflict in Gaza was unable to track down every single Hamas operative and end the conflict. It has become a similar situation with IRGC in Iran. When they separate into smaller groups, when they divide their ammunition, when they have their own objectives and kill lists, it will be impossible for America to go down from on top of the ground and shoot down at targets. 2,000 targets, sure, but a lot of them are moving vehicles with those ballistic missile launchers. They are moving targets. There are big assets that are being taken down. There is no doubt about it. The fact that they created a leadership vacuum, the fact that they created a power vacuum in Iran's top structure is the reason why this mosaic doctrine has been put in place. But its cost is now that they will have to track down every single one of those operating units and their byproducts, apart from the non-state actors, which are the ones causing chaos in the Middle East. And it is now a very expensive war. Every single missile dropped by the planes by USA or Israel is at least 10 times the cost of what Iran is using to hit them. So the cost variation is also very expensive for USA, and they have no choice but to finish this war as of now, because they cannot afford to backtrack. Otherwise they'll have a long lasting problem in the Middle East in the form of what Iran would be now, an irate power with access to military equipment and somewhat second-hand diplomatic immunity provided by Russia and China and US's own actions, which go against universal law. So why I was speaking at another panel the other day, and somebody an Israeli turned around, I'm not a very big fan of international law. It is laid by men and it can be violated by men. Well, that's exactly what has happened. It was the international law was laid down by men for men. It has been violated by those very same men who laid down that law that they expect the rest of the world to follow. So unfortunately, while those targets, the 2,000 number looks big, its impact would be big, but the consequence of it would be that USA is having to pay a big price. I believe there are 6 lives that they have acknowledged that have been lost in the Middle East, and I cannot even presume to understand the amount of billion-dollar damage that their bases, their equipment, their assets, and casualties would come to reflect in the days to come.
Thank you so much, Shruti, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. According to Lebanese state media, Israeli airstrikes have hit a hotel in the Beirut suburb of Hazmir. This strike marks the first recent attack in the predominantly Christian area. The state-run national news agency has reported that ambulances were dispatched to the scene immediately following the strike. Moreover, an Israeli airstrike has also targeted a 4-story building in the eastern Lebanese city of Baalbek early this morning. Sources say that the building is a residential complex and is located in the region controlled by Hezbollah. The national news agency has reported several casualties and said that rescue operations are underway to save families trapped under the rubble. These strikes come as Israel and Hezbollah continue to exchange strikes and rocket fire. We're now being joined by Matthew Vadum, who's an author and journalist, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us here today on NewsX World.
Sure. Okay.
What does the targeting of civilian infrastructure, like a hotel, indicate about how the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah is evolving?
You're saying Israel targeted civilian infrastructure? Who targeted civilian infrastructure?
Sorry, Matthew, you're just
I don't know who
out.
you're accusing of attacking civilian infrastructure, but that is not typically done in civilized warfare. Normally, military installations are targeted in wartime. I don't think Israel would deliberately target civilian infrastructure.
We've just heard reports that Israeli airstrikes have hit a hotel in Beirut.
Well, I very much doubt that I don't know about those reports, and I very much doubt that Israel would deliberately hit a hotel unless it was, like a Hezbollah headquarters, and then it would do it very reluctantly, because Israel, unlike a lot of its neighbors, does abide by the rules of civilized warfare and doesn't go after civilian targets. Sometimes it hits them, sometimes it kills civilians inadvertently, but it doesn't target them as a matter of policy, unlike Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran and a lot of Islamic nations who terrorist groups that do target them deliberately. If now civilian infrastructure is being targeted by Israel, which I'm quite doubtful of, then that would suggest that the war had reached a certain state of desperation where Israel felt it had no other choice. But I just don't believe that. This conflict is only a few days old, and I don't think Israel would be targeting hotels right off the bat when the conflict is only a few days old. So I just find that report very hard to believe.
Okay, Matthew, please don't go anywhere, as we'll be back with you shortly. According to Lebanon's health ministry, another set of Israeli airstrikes on 2 towns south of Beirut have resulted in 6 deaths and 8 injuries. The attacks targeted the areas of Aramoun and Sadiyat, which are located outside of Hezbollah's traditional strongholds in Lebanon. Additionally, the Israeli military has also issued an urgent warning for residents to leave 16 towns and villages in southern Lebanon. The military has advised people to evacuate their homes immediately and move to open areas for safety. According to Lebanese authorities, Israeli strikes have displaced over 58,000 people, with more than 12,500 families seeking shelter in escalating conflict. Lebanese Social Affairs Minister Hanine Sayed has provided the figures, highlighting the severe humanitarian impact on the population. We are now being rejoined again by Matthew. Thank you for joining us back here for this. As we again have just heard, there have been more strikes with, unfortunately, more deaths and more injuries. And we heard that where there has been strikes is located outside of Hezbollah's traditional territory and strongholds. As we're going into days and days of this war, how do you think both sides are now taking this?
Well, it's such a young conflict that it's hard to sense what direction it's going to take. But Israel, along with the United States, are determined to wipe out Iran's mullah-based regime, its theocratic totalitarian dictatorship. And Israel is taking aim at Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is essentially an arm of the Iranian theocracy. They are funded and supported by Iran. So Israel treats them as an extension of Iran and targets them. They are going after targets in Lebanon, but as you yourself said, they have given notice to people in the affected towns that they should evacuate because they want to meet their military objectives, but they don't like civilians being killed inadvertently. So they give them a chance to leave before they attack to lessen the chance that civilians will be killed or injured. It can be very difficult, though, to separate civilians from combatants in a war zone. And so, there's always the risk of what military analysts call collateral damage, of innocent, civilian people being caught up in the fighting. But if Iran is to be defeated, then Hezbollah in Lebanon has to be taken out. It is part of the Iranian terrorist apparatus, and it must be defeated, or it will linger long after the regime is defeated in Tehran, and that day appears to be approaching after the United States and Israel together decapitated the dictatorship in Tehran by killing Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and now by blowing up the Assembly of Experts, which instead of doing something smart like having a Zoom meeting, actually got together to have a physical meeting to elect a successor to Ali Khamenei. So, and many of them were killed. I'm not sure how many, but that was not a smart move on their part. And the United States and Israel are going to keep attacking and killing the leaders of the regime. President Trump, after having negotiations in recent weeks, finally said, I think it was yesterday, that the time for negotiations has passed, and that he wants surrender from the Iranian regime. He wants regime change.
Thanks, Matthew. Again, don't go too far, as we'll be back with you very shortly. Now moving to Israeli military actions against Iranian forces, the Israeli military has announced the killing of a senior commander from Iran's elite Quds force in a latest strike in Tehran. The commander, Ali Zadeh, has said to be a key operative in Lebanon, working on behalf of the Iranian regime to coordinate with Hezbollah. Let's listen in to what he said.
היום, מטוסי קרב בכיר בכוח קודס ומפקד גיס לבנון. עלי זאדה היה המפעיל של חיזבאללה מטעם המשטר האיראני, ומי שהיה אחראי על תיאום הלחימה.
Polling stations have opened early yesterday as primaries began in Texas and North Carolina, deciding the nominees for congressional races. The election will determine who controls the US Congress during President Donald Trump's final 2 years in office. Voters in Texas and North Carolina will select nominees for Senate and US House races, with Trump's recent attack on Iran looming over the campaigns. The Texas Senate race between Republican John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton has caused a divide in the GOP. Democrats are hoping to flip Texas and North Carolina while navigating new redistrictions maps. In North Carolina, former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper and Republican Michael Whatley won their party's primaries, setting up a high-stakes showdown for North Carolina's U.S. Senate seat. Cooper, a popular moderate Democrat, promised to be an independent voice in the Senate, working with President Trump when necessary, but always putting North Carolina first. Whatley, endorsed by Trump, is a former Republican National Committee chairman. The race to fill the seat of retiring Republican from is crucial in determining control of the Senate. We're now being rejoined again by Matthew. Thank you for joining us back here for this.
Right.
To what extent are national themes such as economy, immigration, what's obviously going on in Iran, and Trump involved with Ukraine-Russia talks, influence the outcomes in these states?
Well, these things can be important in national politics. American people tend not to be very interested in international affairs and in foreign relations. So I don't think that those are the primary concerns. The American people are generally focused on so-called pocketbook issues, how the economy is doing. They're also concerned or focused on President Trump's immigration enforcement effort, and so that's important to them. But it's largely the economy and other things. There's conflicting polling on whether President Trump's efforts are popular or not. Apparently, the war in Iran, Trump hasn't done a very good job on selling to the American public because most of the public doesn't seem to support the effort, at least not yet. In Texas, you have the situation where Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, who is a colorful fellow and has had lots of scandals associated with him, is taking on the longtime serving moderate to conservative Senator John Cornyn, who is not as popular with the conservative Republican base. Paxton is popular with the conservative Republican base, and a lot of rank and file conservatives would like to, and the grassroots as they call them, would like to see Cornyn defeated. But apparently that is going to go to a runoff because neither candidate achieved 50% on the first ballot. So they're going to continue fighting about that for a while. In North Carolina, Roy Cooper, former governor, big spending governor, but popular, even though he's a Democrat in a sort of red Republican state, not a deep red Republican state, but he managed to complete terms of office as governor and remain with his reputation intact, and he is popular and a serious contender to replace the outgoing Republican incumbent Senator Tom
Really
Tillis.
sorry, Matthew, we've just got some breaking news coming in, but thank you for joining us on NewsX World. Eric Flores has won the Republican primary for Texas' 34th congressional district, setting up a key general election battle in November. Flores is a Republican Army veteran, former federal prosecutor and lawyer from Mission in South Texas, running to flip the district against Democratic incumbent Vince Vicente Gonzalez. This primary victory comes in a district redrawn recently and seen as a battleground stretching from the Rio Grande Valley up the Gulf Coast to Corpus Christi. Flores has earlier been endorsed by President Trump, positioning him as the GOP's choice to challenge Democrats in November's general election. Colombian President Gustavo Petro has condemned the US-Israel conflict with Iran, criticizing US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's stance and calling for Latin America to lead efforts for dialogue. Speaking in Popayan and on March the 3rd, Petro warned of the looming threat of nuclear war, stressing that humanity is at risk, not just specific nations. Petro pointed out that Latin America, with its diverse origins, could play a crucial role in promoting peace and culture over war and barbarism. He also condemned the US-Israel military strikes on Iran, citing the refusal to create an independent Palestinian state and oil interests as key factors behind the conflict. Let's listen to what the Colombian president had to say.
Y entonces, en un mundo en que se está destruyendo entre civilizaciones, amenazando con la guerra nuclear, América Latina tiene que plantear que es el momento del diálogo de las civilizaciones y no de la confrontación, la guerra y el exterminio entre civilizaciones, que es el momento de la cultura y no el momento de la barbarie, que de Múnich salió Hitler hacia una barbarie que no hemos olvidado, así los latinoamericanos no la hayamos sentido, pero ahora sí sentimos la barbarie, la sentimos en nuestro alrededor. Indudablemente estamos viviendo el riesgo de vida para toda la humanidad, porque no es un asunto de Teherán o de Tel Aviv o de Washington o de Abu Dhabi o Dubái, etcétera, ciudades mágicas si las vemos en fotos, pero hoy bombardeadas como bombardearon a Gaza. Encontraríamos que no es solo allá, sino que toda la humanidad está a punto de caer en un abismo que es la guerra nuclear, de la cual nadie, ni aquí mismo.
According to reports, outflows from Iranian crypto exchanges have surged following the US and Israeli strikes on Iran. Reports suggest more than $2 million was withdrawn within an hour after the big strikes began. Blockchain firms have reported that outflows from Iran's largest exchange, Norbitex, peaked at $2.8 million, showing an 8-fold increase compared to the previous day's peak. In total, $10.3 million in crypto reportedly left Iranian exchanges from the 28th of February to 2nd of March. According to experts, the data has highlighted the increasing role of cryptocurrency in Iran, with activity typically spiking over geopolitical events. We have some more breaking news coming in right now. In a recent post on X, Randir Jaiswal, the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs of India, has announced that President Alexander Stubb of Finland has arrived in New Delhi on a state visit to India. Jaiswal has stated that President Stubb was received with a ceremonial welcome and a guard of honour and was greeted by Minister of State KV Singh at the airport. Jaiswal has also mentioned that President Stubb will be the chief guest and keynote speaker at the Rasina Dialogue 2026. Jaiswal has also highlighted that friendly relations between India and Finland, which he says is rooted in shared democratic values. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.